41. And 64. Thanks for tuning in and welcome back to the shop. I sure hope those measurements are right because once this is bolted down, there's no going back. Step one to secure this kitchen is going to be putting some screws through the feet and into the floor. Now these screws will go through the laminate flooring and into the plywood subfloor underneath. On the surface, that seems pretty straightforward, but it gets a little bit more difficult. You may remember underneath the kitchen, I've installed some drawer slides. These slides are attached to the feet. So to start with, I need to remove these. That's not the difficult part. The difficult part is the screw that is underneath here. I only have a few inches to get the screw in and the tool to put the screw in. I've kind of pinned all my hopes on one very cheap tool that I picked up on Amazon. Most people probably have these already, but I got myself an almost 90-degree, actually it's more like 75, driver to go in my cordless drill. So hopefully, with this in my drill and my bit in here, I'm able to drive those screws in the very limited space that I have. So with my drill on its side, I should have enough room to get this screw in and turning. Now, if that doesn't work, I do have a bit of a backup plan. I really hope I don't need to go to it, but one of these small driver kits, I can get in very low clearance and manually ratchet the screws in. I really hope I don't have to go that way, but I think this is gonna work. May as well start with some of the easy ones. Let's see what happens. So, this gives me a little bit more clearance than if I was doing it from underneath, but gives you the idea of how this is gonna work. So, the screws are gonna be going in on a bit of an angle, sort of under the feet, just so that I have even more clearance here. But you can see my drill is below the level of the base of the cabinet. And as long as I can push down, let's give it a try. Going in, I can't. There we go. Not quite as smooth as I'd want it to go. It's a little bit difficult to try and push down on this and stop it from trying to rotate at the same time, but that screw is definitely all the way in there. That foot, with one screw in it, is not going to move. Now, it is worth noting, I'm using all stainless steel. If we get a water leak under here, I don't want any rusting going on. Absolute worst thing would be if I do have to pull this kitchen out later and I try and remove the screws and the heads are full of rust or they snap off. Not going to be fun. It's already not going to be fun if I got to pull the kitchen out. I might as well use some good stainless hardware to make it easier if I do have to.
There is, of course, more than one advantage to using the stainless steel screws. In addition to not rusting, the heads are much more resistant to stripping out when the driver bit skips a few times.
Well, that's all the easy ones. The outside four I probably could have done without this adapter, but I wanted to get a bit of practice and see what it's like before I get into the tight spots. The next 6 are the ones along the front, and they're going to be a little bit more difficult, but still not horrible access. So I'm going to take the drawer slides off and I'm going to do the front 6, and that's going to leave me with the last back 6 that are going to be painfully difficult. Well, we seem to have run into our first little problem. Reaching isn't the problem. Being able to squeeze the trigger on the drill is not the problem. But getting 2 arms in there at the same time is a problem. I can lie on my side and reach all the way in with 1 arm. I can lie on my other side, but I can't get both arms in lying on my side, and I can't get both arms in lying on my front. So we're gonna have to rethink this a little bit. After a lot of very uncomfortable rolling around on the floor, my arm hinges don't work the way they used to. I've managed to get 14 of the 16 screws in. So these 2 have 2 screws each. This one has 2. This one I have not been able to get to, but the rest of these all have the screws in. I'm not too concerned because I think 14 screws is plenty to hold this down. And in addition, the next step I'm going to be taking is making some mounts to the wall here. This section right here has a mount on either side of it, so it's one of the places that'll be stronger to be held down from the top. For the next step, I'm going to be putting the second cabinet on top of this one. So I'm going to start by removing these bars, which are meant to be here to attach a countertop. Because we're just stacking one cupboard on top of the next, the countertop is going to end beside this one. So, should be pretty easy. So those clips were good to have in here while I was moving everything around, but now that it's bolted down to the floor, we can set that other cabinet on top of here and nothing can really move anyway. But that second cabinet will hold the width square, and once I get the brackets onto the wall, the back won't be able to move either. Now obviously it wouldn't make much sense to just balance a cabinet on top of another one, so I do have to fasten them together. I do have some brackets that are left over. I believe these are intended to secure it to the wall. I'm using a different method there. There are actually some much heavier duty brackets that I'm going to use for that. So I'm going to use these ones to be able to mount the upper cabinet to the lower one. These line up with the holes that are already here in the front, and one of them will line up at the back. So I'm just going to pop 4 of these brackets in here. I'll need to make a little spacer because they're not quite the right height, but that should allow me to secure that cabinet to this one. So to wrap up the connection of the lower and the upper cupboards, you can see I've got the bracket in place here. This little gap here is going to get filled by one of the spacers that was originally intended to secure it to the wall. So I'm going to have the spacer, and then I've got this little clip that kind of slots into that spacer. One of the washers left over from when I installed the feet, and a stainless steel screw. I don't know how much of this you're going to be able to see, but we'll give it a shot.
I want to take this opportunity to thank everyone who has been subscribing to our channel. We've just hit the 2,500 subscriber mark. This may not seem like a big number to many, but it is for us. Thank you. And if you're not subscribed, consider hitting that button to help us hit our next milestone.
Well, I think those are the 2 most uncomfortable places in the build so far. Inside that cabinet and underneath this one. Next step should be a little bit easier. I gotta put the wall on that side of the kitchen. So I have a 16-inch wide board that I've pre-cut to the right height. And I've also put a notch in for the wiring and plumbing to get through. So this basically clamps on the outside here. And as you can see, we have a gap up at the ceiling. You have to have that gap up there in order to be able to get the board into place. But I thought I could use that to my advantage. Let me grab something from inside. These 3D printed blocks should give me just enough lift to close up the gap at the ceiling and at the same time lift that wall up off the floor, so if we ever have any water on the floor, it doesn't wick up into the wood. These have screw holes in them so I can screw it down to the floor. Once the wall is slid into place, I can also use these holes to fasten through the board into this block. Now, that board's also going to be fastened to the side of the kitchen, so it can't really go anywhere anyway, but I think these will do the trick. So I've just used the leftover scrap so it's easier to remove and install. But I've got this flush up against the kitchen and I've got the two pieces underneath in place. So if I remove this carefully, I can now put the screws down through these blocks. Good. So that's going to hold that just up off the ground. So if any water gets in there, it shouldn't be able to wick up into the bottom of the board. Or at least, if it does, it's got to be at least 1/8 of an inch deep. With the block secured to the floor, now I can swing this wall into its final placement. Up on the lip. And nicely snug into place up top. Got one clamp on it for now. It is pretty secure on its own. And I'm going to put a couple screws in from the back side just to keep it in place for now. Once the bench seat gets put into place, everything is going to be really not able to move at all. I'm just going to use the same holes that the pegs go in for the shelves. One at the very top. One at the very bottom. The same in the back row. And one at the top in the back row. And here's the full view, with the last cupboard door on just for fun. I think it's starting to look like something. This cupboard's a lot more comfortable than the other one. That's it. Kitchen's in. Done. No more. Well, okay, maybe there's a little bit more. But at least the main structure of the kitchen is in now. Next, I can focus on the countertop. Hope you enjoyed that video. If you did, give us a thumbs up. If you haven't already, hit subscribe. Don't forget to check the video description for the links. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.